Hello, everybody. My name is Maynard Warren, and I've been working with your company now for quite some time. And the purpose of this video is to kind of walk you through your SPQ GOLD sales call reluctance results. You're getting ready to get those. Hopefully, you've enjoyed the workshop to this point today, and your facilitator is getting ready to hand out your test results. And I wanted to walk you through those, just to help it make a little bit more sense to you, and so that you can make the necessary observations as you look at your test results. So you're getting ready to receive this, and prior to getting into this, what I'd like to do is first of all just give you a little bit of a background of how this assessment came about. I know some of you might have some concerns or questions about the validity of the assessment, and so let me just speak to that first off, and then I'll get into the exact measurements and things like that you're going to find in your assessment results. The Sales Call Reluctance Program was designed by George Dudley and Shannon Goodson, and I'm one of their distributors working in partnership with your training staff at your company. But George Dudley and Shannon Goodson wrote this book, and in all likelihood, you've already got your individual copy of this book. But their research that they've done on sales call reluctance has been based on work that they've been doing since 1970, 1971, and they continue to research salespeople to this day. So they've got countless years of validated research projects that they've done that show a direct correlation between productivity of a commissioned salesperson or productivity of a salesperson and their call reluctance measurements. So I think it's important as you go through these things that you're going to see in your assessment results that you don't get freaked out and think that, oh, I failed this miserably, or I'm not cut out to be a salesperson, because that's not really what this is all about. In my view, your assessment results will point to some of the things that you've got that currently are strengths of yours as you go about prospecting on a consistent basis and also selling on a consistent basis. And also, this assessment will point out some things that right now might be a blind spot for you, might be some deficiencies in the way you go about prospecting, selling, and really letting the marketplace know that you're out there selling the services that you sell. So again, don't get freaked out, but it is based on a lot of research that's been done since the very early 70s, tons of validated research projects that continually show the correlation between the results that you're getting ready to look at and typically how much commission you're going to make. So there is kind of that one-to-one relationship, if you will. So without further ado, the way that we're going to go through your assessment results will be as follows. We showed the cover page, if you will, of this sample report, and that's what this is. This isn't a report of any of you there in attendance. This is a sample report. This is the cover page. Also has a disclaimer toward the bottom of it. Hopefully your name is spelled correctly, because you'll see your name on your report. But where this thing really starts to get good is if you flip over on the next page, where it says section number 1. Section number 1, and you'll notice there are actually 6 sections of this assessment. Section number 1 is all about how much overall call reluctance do you have a predisposition right now to have holding you back, perhaps holding your career hostage, or putting an artificially low ceiling on how productive, effective, and how many sales you can make. So section number 1 is really about your overall call reluctance scores. And let me just review the first category, and this is the first of 21 specific scales, and some people call these measurements. The first category that you're going to see says prospecting break. Prospecting break, if you notice under that, and it's printed in light blue print, you'll notice prospecting break. To the right of the words prospecting break TM, you'll see a score. You'll see 2 numbers. That's your score. Now let me share with you what that score means. Underneath prospecting break, you'll see something called capsule summary. Now, again, don't get freaked out or put off by capsule summary. This is not about you. Capsule summary is all about the definition for the category that we're looking at, which happens to be prospecting break. So as you look at capsule summary, just compute that in your head as this is the definition. It's not about you, folks. Now, consequently, the next heading that you'll see where it says management tips, that is about you. So where it says management tips for these categories, that's a little bit of narrative and interpretation about your particular score that you've got for whatever the category is. You're going to see capsule summaries and management tips for each of the measurements that are contained in your assessment. Now, if you go a little bit lower, you're going to see something called prospecting break code. Now, when you see the prospecting break code, that's either going to be a green, a yellow, or a red. When you see the green, yellow, or red, again, the way that I would like you to compute this is it's just like a traffic light. If your score is green, that means go. That means right now, this particular category is a strength of yours. If your color code is yellow, then that's precautionary. That's precautionary. And the reason it's precautionary is because sometimes this category, again, whichever one it is, it may be inhibiting you. And at other times during your week or day, your week, your month, your year, at other times, it's not going to be an issue at all. So yellow, typically, another way to look at those are average scores. And then the last color code is red. And red indicates something that right now could be holding you back. It really depends on whether it's in an applicable category that pertains to the way that you sell, the way that you prospect, things that are important to your company and your industry. But typically, greens are strengths, yellow indicates precautionary scores, maybe average scores, and red indicates something that is an alert score. It's something that you should be alerted to that right now may be putting an artificially low ceiling on how productive you can be. So again, just like a traffic light, green, yellow, and red. So as you're going through this, and I'll stick with prospecting break for a second, on this sample that I'm looking at, this person's prospecting break code is red. So I'm going to take from my sheet of dots that all of you have, I'm going to take the appropriate color dot, which in this case is red, and then I'm going to put that red dot, and I personally like it when participants put the red dot actually over their number. What you'll notice is that these are see-through dots that we're using, and because we're sparing no expense and we're only using the latest and modern dot technology for you and your other wonderful folks there in the room attending this program. Okay, enough about that. So prospecting break is all about how much energy right now are you predisposed to be wasting due to call reluctance. Let me restate that one last time. Prospecting break is an indication of how much call reluctance you've got right now that could be holding your career hostage. Another way to look at it is how much of your energy right now are you predisposed to waste due to one or more of the 12 call reluctance types. We're going to get into the 12 call reluctance types in section number 2 in this report. So as you look at prospecting break, that's how much energy you're wasting, folks. In my opinion, like this sample person is wasting 55% of his or her energy. That's dramatic. Some of you may have a score that's in the red zone. If you do, what that means is right now you've got a little bit more fear than most salespeople. And this is the perfect workshop that you're in, by the way. If you've got a yellow for prospecting break, it means you're wasting about as much energy as the typical salesperson. If you happen to have a green for your prospecting break score, it means right now you're a little bit more fearless than the typical salesperson that's out there, pounding the pavement in today's marketplace. But still, if you have a score higher than 0, even if you're in the green zone, if you've got a score higher than 0, it means you're wasting some of your energy. So if I were in your shoes, if I had a green score, I'd pat myself on the back, but then say, holy smokes, look at how much energy I'm still wasting, even though I'm a little bit more fearless than the typical salesperson. The next category on your assessment is Prospecting Accelerator. And what you'll notice is Prospecting Accelerator, as you read through it, it's the exact opposite of Prospecting Break Score. Prospecting Accelerator gives you a gauge of how much of your energy right now, how much of your motivational energy are you using effectively. So Prospecting Accelerator is a gauge, barometer, if you will, of how much of your motivational energy that you could be putting into prospecting are you currently using to help reach your goals, support your goals, and actually translating into productive behaviors and habits. So the first two categories, break score is how much of your motivational energy currently is on the break. Prospecting Accelerator is how much of your energy right now is accelerating to help you with reaching the goals and objectives that you've set forth for your sales career. Okay. Now let's move over to the next section, which is going to be section number 2. And in section number 2, you'll notice that this is the start of the 12 types of call reluctance. Now I'm going to go through these just one by one and give you a real brief observation on each of the 12 types. But a few things are still in place that we already talked about in section number 1. It's still the same color code, green, yellow, and red. Green is the strength, yellow is precautionary. Red means stop. This could be something right now causing you to not just waste your energy, but causing you to waste commissions that by all rights and intents and purposes should be yours. Doomsayer is the first category. That's a measurement of how much energy, how much of your motivational energy currently is going into worrying. When your score's in the red zone, normally what that means is that you'll be prone to make some excuses like, I know I could call on that prospect, but I'm sure he's not going to be interested, or I'm sure she's not going to be interested. I know they're not going to buy. I know Friday's a bad day to make prospecting calls. So doomsayers typically are people that look at the glass as half empty versus half full. The second category that we're going to look at is over-preparation, and I'm sure that's a lot more familiar to a lot of you. Normally in the workshops that we teach around the country, about 30 to 45% of the salespeople that attend, that have completed the assessment, fall into the red zone for over-preparation. It's pretty prevalent. As you look at over-preparation, it is what it sounds like. It's a salesperson that feels that they've got to have all the information at their disposal, and they need to have dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's before they can initiate contact. Quite frankly, if you do that long enough, you're wasting valuable sales time, and you're going to run out of time. What we find is that with over-preparers, ones that are really doing well, and by the way, just because you've got a red in a category, that doesn't mean that you're a failure. It's just pointing to a particular area that maybe you should be giving some attention to and working on. What we find with over-preparers, though, is when somebody scores in the red zone and they're still a top performer, they're probably spending way too much time at their job and in their office, and it's really cutting into their personal time and maybe the quality time with their loved ones or family. So over-preparer salespeople typically just really feel comfortable once they've done tons of research, and they would not allow themselves to pull the trigger and actually make a prospecting call if they haven't done enough research. The third category that we're going to look at is hyperpro call reluctance. Hyperpro is a salesperson that's putting way too much of their motivational energy into their image. Their typical excuses are things like, I've already called that prospect once. I can't believe they haven't called me back. I can't believe that they're not showing me the professional courtesy or dignity to give me a return phone call. I'll show them. I'll never call them again. Now, maybe I'm over dramatizing a little bit, but I've actually heard hyperpro salespeople say this in workshops. Maybe a little bit more familiar to you is this excuse, and I've heard this from many veteran hyperpro salespeople. I've been in the business now for 4 or 5 years. I don't think I have to cold call anymore. I'm just going to work off of referred leads. Hyperpros quite oftentimes feel that prospecting for new business is beneath them and demeaning. So that's hyperpros. To this point, we've looked at 3 categories: doomsayer, we've looked at over-preparation, we've looked at hyperpro. All 3 of these are big types, and what I mean by that is you're going to do an exercise after we review these 12 types. Your facilitator will ask you to choose the type of call reluctance that you feel right now the most motivated to correct, perhaps because it's the one that you feel is costing you the most in lost commission dollars. But as you look at these 3, doomsayer, over-preparation, and hyperpro, those, if you scored red in any of those three, you should give that those categories strong consideration, because typically they can have quite a negative impact on salespeople when they're present within a salesperson. Let's go through the next few types. Stage fright is the fourth category. It's just what it sounds like. Stage fright is the hesitation to get in front of groups. If you're in the green zone, it means right now you wish your face was on this picture and not mine. And you're probably right. You probably could do a better job. Yellow is a salesperson that has particular types of groups that they feel totally comfortable with, but then other groups that really cause them stress, tension, and anxiety. If you're at red in the stage fright category, what that means is when you think about getting in front of a group, and typically any type of group, it's going to start to cause you stress, tension, and anxiety. Consequently, you're not going to include any group presenting in your sales strategy or marketing strategies as you try to penetrate and sign up new clients. Normally, the biggest excuse I hear, or the biggest rationalization that I hear from stage fright salespeople, is they'll say the following: I'm much better one-on-one. The next category after stage fright is role rejection. Role rejection is a measurement of how do you feel about selling as a profession. How do you feel about the profession that you've chosen, which happens to be that of a professional salesperson? There's a lot of negative info out there on the profession of sales. I don't know how many of you have actually seen some sales movies, that have kind of cast salespeople in a negative light. It proliferates out in the marketplace. Things like Glengarry, Glen Ross, Tommy Boy. The list goes on and on of movies that are out there that cast a disparaging view of salespeople. And a lot of people, even though they're in sales, have kind of bought into that negativity that kind of accompanies being called a salesperson. One of the ways that you can tell that maybe you've got some role rejection about your career is, do you ever call yourself a salesperson? If you're in the red zone, just ask yourself that. When you introduce yourself to folks, do you say, I'm working with my company and I'm a salesperson? Or do you say something, over at my company, I'm the Western Director for Business Cultivation, some ridiculous title like that. We call those deflective titles. And so role rejection may or may not be a big type of call reluctance for you right now. It just happens to be the biggest type in the insurance industry. And maybe that's self-explanatory, but there's a lot of negative press out there about insurance salespeople, and quite oftentimes they will acquire role rejection because of all the negativity out there about salespeople. So as you look at role rejection, that's the fifth type. The sixth type of call reluctance is yielding, a yielder salesperson. This is the most common type of call reluctance in the world. And normally what we see is about 40 to 50% of salespeople that complete this assessment, that attend our workshop, score in the red zone for yielding. It's the second most costly type of call reluctance that we found. And a yielder, quite frankly, is a salesperson that really concerns himself with being too pushy. They never want to do anything that they would consider to be, that they feel a prospective client would consider to be too pushy, too forward, or intrusive. So when you look at yielders, those are folks that maybe have really gone off the deep end, so to speak, with relationships. We all know that to be successful in sales, and particularly commission sales, you have to be proficient at developing relationships. Well, yielders typically have taken that really good thing, which is being a relationship-based salesperson, and they've just blown it up to the point where they're obsessing with it. Now, they've got a prospecting system, perhaps, that says when they call a prospect, let's say hypothetically on a Monday, that they can't call back until the following Monday. And by the way, folks, if any of you are doing that, that's a horrible prospecting system. As your yielder decreases, meaning that as you worry less about whether your actions are going to be construed as bothersome, pushy, or intrusive, all of a sudden a whole new wealth of creativity will enter your mind as far as different ways you can pursue business, things you can do for some of those hard to crack into accounts. So again, yielder, very, very costly because it impacts not just the way that you prospect and how often you contact your prospective clients and what frequency, but also it impacts the way that you are when you're on your sales calls. Whether you're able to hang in there and handle some of those tough or objections that your prospects give you. Typically, yielders hate conflict. So at the sign of the first objection, yielders, mentally at least, are kind of packing their bags, saying, "Oh, that this deal's blown." And then, as kind of a last resort, they'll say something like, "Well, would it be okay for me to call you back in 6 months, Mr. Prospect?" And of course, the prospect is going to say, "Sure." So the yielder, that's the only way they can kind of justify the guilt that they feel, because they know they should have hung in there and overcome those objections, but emotionally they didn't want to get into conflict. At this point, I need to mention that all these things, and we've looked at 6 of the types of call reluctance, every type of call reluctance is something that you can overcome. It's something that's fixable. Let's run through the last 5 types. Social self-consciousness is a salesperson that has a hesitation to contact upscale clients. It's a salesperson that may be in the habit of making their presentations and their sales calls at middle levels within their prospective accounts. And at some point in the accounts that you call on, if you're calling too low, you're talking to somebody that can only tell you no. And that's really important for folks with a red score for social self-consciousness to understand, is that quite oftentimes, if you've got a red for this, and if it's something that right now is present in you and causing you to perhaps call the wrong people and not go high enough in the prospective accounts that you're calling into, man, that is dollars lost out of your pocket, because you're calling on people quite oftentimes that can only tell you no. And how in the world is that going to help you or me make our commissions and make the numbers that we need to make on a monthly and yearly basis? Another way that social self-consciousness can negatively impact the salesperson is it will make some accounts off limits to them. What I mean by that is, if you've got social self-consciousness, maybe the way that it's negatively impacting you is that you're looking at some of your prospects and you've isolated some that you call your premium prospects, and you're coming up with rationalizations on why you're not ready to call them yet. You're coming up with reasons that justify inaction. You're coming up with things to justify why you're currently invisible to them. So again, 2 ways that social self-consciousness typically can negatively impact you. The next 2 types of call reluctance are separationist and emotionally unemancipated. That's how do you feel about networking with your friends, and how do you feel about networking with your relatives? With most of my clients, those 2 are a little bit important, but they're not the biggies. As you look at the other types of call reluctance, normally you'll find one of the other 10 types to be something that at least I would prefer that you choose to work on, versus choosing to work on separationist call reluctance or emotionally unemancipated call reluctance. Again, one last time, they might be mildly important, but I don't think, even if you've got a red score for separationist or emotionally unemancipated, I don't think those 2 are career killers, whereas some of the others might very well be a career killer. The 10th type of call reluctance is the most costly type of call reluctance. It's called referral aversion. Referral aversion is a salesperson that comes up with rationalizations and ways to justify not asking their happy clients for the names of others that perhaps they could be calling on that might also need their particular suite of solutions or their particular service. So when a salesperson has referral aversion, it can cost as much as, at least the average is, around $24,000 a year in lost commissions. We find a lot of salespeople have a hesitancy to ask their happy clients for referrals. Now, with that being the case, if you scored in the red zone for referral aversion, there is definitive hope for you. It has been found to be the most or the easiest type of call reluctance to overcome. We just need to get a new head on our shoulders about what asking for referrals really is all about. It's really asking somebody for advice. It's really asking one of your clients for help. And just think about yourself. Don't you like to help others? Think about yourself again. Don't you love to give advice to others? So that's really all asking for referrals is. And once we get that set in our mind, for those of you in the red zone, it's going to make asking for referrals quite comfortable and a lot easier for you. The 11th type of call reluctance is telephobia. Telephobia is a salesperson that would much rather go face-to-face. And that's normally the biggest excuse we hear from folks that have telephobia. And then the 12th type is a little bit funky type of call reluctance, it's called oppositional reflex. But if you just kind of piece out the words oppositional reflex, it really tells you what it's all about. It's a salesperson that reflexively wants to do the opposite. It's a salesperson that sometimes is overly critical of themselves, and they hold themselves to a high standard. And then what they do is they project that same high standard onto their work associates and maybe even their manager. And when those folks that are around them fail to meet those personal high standards that they've set for themselves, when they fail to meet that level of that type of standard, then the person with oppositional reflex will become critical of others. What you'll find as far as how it impacts prospecting is typically folks with oppositional reflex want to do their own thing. If their manager says, hey, gang, we're all blitzing on Tuesdays, somebody with oppositional will probably say, you know, Tuesday's a horrible day for prospecting. I think I'm going to do my blitzing on Wednesday. And then it goes on and on and on. The common thing that all 12 of these types have is that they all cause you to waste precious motivational energy that you could be putting into things that can help you reach your personal goals and your business sales goals. And one other thing that all 12 of these types have in common is they come with a price. Each of these 12 types will cost you money over time. So I hope as you look at these 12 types that maybe I was able to clear up a few things in your mind about what these types mean. And what I'd like for you to do, and your facilitator will give you some instructions on this, but what I'd like to see you do is actually choose your personal number one type of call reluctance that you feel is right now holding you back the most, the one that consequently you're the most motivated to either control or maybe perhaps hopefully totally get rid of. And once you've done that, be prepared to have a conversation amongst you and your group mates about the number one type of call reluctance that you've selected for yourself to either control or overcome. Share with your group also why you chose that as your number one type. And then also share with your group how you feel, kind of project into the future, kind of your vision of the future. Once you overcome or really get this type of call reluctance that you choose, once you get it under control, how's your life going to be different? What are you going to be able to do differently with your prospecting efforts? What are you going to be able to do differently in your selling efforts? So this is, again, what we've reviewed is sections number 1 and section number 2. There's some activities for you to do now. And then hopefully you'll have me back on camera to talk about the rest of the assessment here in just a few minutes. Thank you. Hello everyone, this is Manard Warren again, and nice to be with you once more. I want to review now with you, just want to go through section 3 of your assessment with you. Section 3 is all about the call reluctance imposters. Now, think about the word imposter for a second. You know, it's something that mimics something else. So with sales call reluctance, which we talked about in the prior segment, with sales call reluctance, that the presence of sales call reluctance always results in low prospecting or selling activity. You need to understand that. The presence of sales call reluctance always results in low prospecting or low selling activity. Now, when we look at the imposters, they really don't have much to do with call reluctance, if any to do with call reluctance. But the result of some of these things that we're going to look at in section 3 in your profile, the result is going to be the same. It's going to look identical to a sales call reluctant salesperson. And let me go ahead and get into this so it'll make a little bit of sense to you. The first category that you'll notice in section number 3 is prospecting motivation. And let me review the green, yellow, and red for prospecting motivation. When a salesperson has a green for prospecting motivation, what that means is they've got more energy that they're prepared to dedicate into prospecting than the typical salesperson. That's a good thing, of course. When a salesperson has a yellow for their prospecting motivation, what that actually means is they're a salesperson that quite oftentimes is going to set the house on fire with their prospecting activities, but then they'll find that there are days or maybe weeks that will come and go when they don't even think about prospecting. It kind of depends on the mood they're in for that day or the mood they're in for that week. So a yellow is a salesperson, again, that's kind of sitting on the fence at least in this case with their motivation. Sometimes they're very well motivated and they can pound out the calls and make the contacts. Other times they'll go a day, 2 days, maybe even a week. Don't even think about prospecting. That's a yellow motivation. If you're in the red for your prospecting motivation, typically what salespeople with reds for motivation have told me is that they're trying to reach their sales numbers without prospecting for new business at all. And when I say prospecting for new business at all, let me explain that a little bit. They're trying to make their sales numbers without doing any cold calls. Now, of course, they're going to prospect, but they're going to find other ways to prospect. They're going to send out flyers. Maybe they do all their prospecting via email. Maybe they just work off referred leads. But normally when somebody's got a red for prospecting motivation, the way that impacts them is they're trying to create a success formula that doesn't include cold calling new prospective clients. Immediately, with a lot of salespeople, that puts you behind the 8 ball as far as whether you're going to make your numbers or not. It's almost like you're trying to make your commission with one arm tied behind your back. As we go through this, and I don't think I mentioned this in the other segment with your group, is any of these categories that you're not comfortable with, or you disagree with my example symptoms that I'm giving you, that's okay for you to disagree. If you've got a red for motivation, for instance, it's okay for you to disagree with that. I don't want you, after your facilitator cuts off the video, I don't want you going around saying, hey, that Manard doesn't know what he's talking about. What I'd like for you to do is, before you close down and become closed-minded about the category in and of itself, just read the section in your Psychology of Call Reluctance textbook about whatever the particular category is. For instance, there's an entire section about prospecting motivation in Chapter 2 in your Psychology of Call Reluctance textbook. Let's go on to the next category. It's prospecting goal level. This is all about what's the ambitiousness of the sales and personal goals that you've set forth for yourself. Let's go through the green, yellow, and red. Green typically is a salesperson that's really fixated on some ambitious goals, and they've got some pretty good action plans behind them. Somebody in the yellow for goal level is somebody, normally from what I've heard from salespeople with a yellow for prospecting goal level, it's a salesperson that has some good goals in their mind, kind of swimming around, so to speak, but they don't have action plans yet. And their action plans are kind of cloudy and misty. They're not real rock solid. If you've got a red for goal level, normally what that means is that right now you don't really have substantial, ambitious goals set forth for yourself personally or sales-wise at your company. Now, when goals are not present in a commissioned salesperson, guess what becomes our number one goal? Reaching quota, which is the goal that your company has set for you, but it's not a goal that you've made for yourself. So just kind of think through this for a second. Regardless of what your color code is, whether it's green, yellow, or red, just think about what are your goals. And if you hear in your mind popping up again and again that your number one goal is to hit quota, you're probably limiting yourself there. I would think that you're awesome enough sitting in that seat to actually raise your goals, which normally what happens, guess what happens when somebody raises their goals? They raise their game, they raise their productivity, they make more money. So that's motivation, that's goal level. The next category is prospecting goal diffusion. Prospecting goal diffusion is a salesperson, and it's very prevalent right now in today's time in the new millennium. Prospecting goal diffusion is a salesperson that actually, and you notice on the sample that I've got here, it's somebody with a 100. We see that all the time. Salespeople that have too many irons in the fire. They're trying to do way too much within each given workday. They've got all the minutia they need to do in their workload. They've got emails to return. They've got managers coming to them wanting sales status reports. Their managers want them to clean up their CRMs, their automated databases. And then also, as a commission salesperson, we're expected to prospect. So goal diffusion, typically the most common excuse is a salesperson that at the end of the day looks at their things to do list and they've got most of their things done with maybe the exception of one, which is prospect for new business. And of course, what they say at the end of the day is, I ran out of time. I ran out of time today. I'll do it tomorrow. And by the way, what I used to say when I was goal diffused is, I'll double up tomorrow. So my excuse at the end of the day would be, man, it was a busy day. Boy, I worked hard. I put in 10 hours, but I never called the first person. You know what? I'll double up tomorrow. And by the way, I never did. It's the funniest thing, some of the things that we say to ourselves just to alleviate guilt. And a lot of us are expert at that. I know I used to be when I had these things that negatively impacted my sales career. So goal diffusion is a salesperson that really needs to do a much better job of scheduling their priorities. They need to do priority management. They actually need to set aside time to prospect, and not just some nebulous, I need to make 10 calls this week. They really need to get succinct with their discipline around prospecting. They need to start saying things like, I will set an appointment with myself to make 10 calls Monday morning from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. If you've got goal diffusion, I think you're probably at that point where you really need to have a talk with yourself about definitively scheduling your prospecting and not just allowing it to hang out there, because you know yourself that you're so busy doing other things that your company's asking you to do that prospecting typically is the first thing that gets thrown out on a daily basis. Okay, so those are the three imposters. If you've got a red score in any of those three imposters right now, you in fact are an imposter, which means your prospecting is below the level that you could potentially be at with your prospecting. Right now you're below where you could be, but it doesn't have anything to do with call reluctance. So you should look at each of these categories that we've just looked at: motivation, goal level, and goal diffusion as kind of entities upon themselves. Don't relate them. I don't want you to primarily relate these to call reluctance. Call reluctance causes the same thing. It looks the same thing. If you're a manager sitting in this class, it looks the same to you. But really the root cause of imposters is something totally different than the 12 types of call reluctance. The last category in section 3 is problem solving. And let me go ahead and help your facilitator out a little bit and give you the color codes. For problem solving, if you score, and by the way, problem solving, remember the questions from the assessment: if Barbara's daughter is my daughter's mother, what am I to Barbara? Did that question drive you cuckoo like it does with most people? Anyway, there are 5 problem solving questions on the assessment. And your problem solving score is your gauge of how you did on those 5 problem solving questions. If you scored 0, guess what color that is? That's red. If you scored 20, that's red. If you scored 40, that's yellow. If you scored 60 or 80, congratulations, you're in the green zone. And if you scored a 100, you're back in the yellow zone. And it may cause you to have a little frown upon your face. But the reason we give you a yellow, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek. If you scored 100 and scored a yellow, the reason for that is because you probably are a green, but you're so good at solving problems, sometimes you may cause some problems just so you'll have some to solve to help you as an escape route away from prospecting or proactive selling activities. So I wouldn't get real caught up in this category, folks. Regardless of where you scored on the scale, it's really all about what's your degree of tolerance for potentially frustrating tasks that come across your desk. So that's a review of the imposters section. What I'd like for you to do now is in your teams, share with your teammates your overall assessment of your motivation currently to prospect and really get out in the marketplace and make yourself known to your key prospects. Also share with your group your current prospecting goal level. Be as specific as you can allow yourself to be in sharing with your group what the current state of affairs is with your goal level. And then thirdly, if you could, share with your group whether you think goal diffusion right now is something that might be kind of your nemesis, something that could be causing your proactive prospecting to currently be down a notch or two of where potentially it could be for you with the goals that you've set for yourself. So again, to recap, what I'd like for you to do is to share with your group kind of your current assessment of your prospecting motivation level. Also share with your group your current assessment of your prospecting goals. And then lastly, share with your group your current assessment of your potential goal diffusion. Do you ever find yourself distracted? What are some of the things that perhaps you do to keep your sights set on proactive prospecting so you never get behind the 8 ball and get skinny funnels and all the negative things that go along with skinny funnels. So again, I want to thank you for watching this video segment. Good luck with your conversations with your group mates. Thank you. Hello again, everybody. It's nice to be back with you. I want to finish up your assessment results. And by the way, this is going to take us, if we take more than 5 minutes on this video segment, I want you to get my contact info from your facilitator and call me and send me hate mail. Because in my opinion, we've covered all the important stuff in your assessment. We've covered call reluctance, the 12 types, your overall fear factor, which was the first categories we looked at, the prospecting brake and accelerator. We've covered prospecting motivation, which is critical, prospecting goals, which is crucial, goal diffusion, which is plaguing salespeople in corporate America today. These last things, we'll review these just because you have scores on these measurements, but I don't want any of you to get freaked out by any of the stuff that we're getting ready to cover. Let's start with section 4. If you'll notice in section number 4, it starts with a category called impression management. Impression management is all about how important is it for you to make really good impressions with other people. If you scored in the red zone for impression management, it's not, I repeat, it is not saying that you lied on this assessment. All it's saying is you like to make good impressions on folks. I don't know about you, but me personally, I love to make good impressions on people. So if you're in the red zone, I wouldn't worry about it. With the next category, hedging, that's all about when you took the assessment, did you try to play it safe? What that means is if you scored in the red zone, for hedging, it means that you put a lot of in-between answers as you completed the assessment. But again, I wouldn't worry about it if I were you. The last category here in section number 4 is response consistency. Response consistency is all about how consistent were you answering all those similar type questions. And normally what we look for is a response consistency that's 20 or above. And even if you're in the red zone, if you're above 20, what we found, just based on research that's been done in the past, is that your results are still going to be rock solid. What I mean by that is that your results still are going to be accurate for you. So that's section 4. Again, we covered that pretty quickly just because I don't think those things are actionable, even if you scored in the red zone. If you look over at the next section, it's called section 5, interview support guide, critical items. This really doesn't relate to you simply because some companies use this assessment in their hiring process. For instance, they'll give this assessment to salespeople prior to them being extended a job offer. So for companies that use our assessment that way, section 5 is a critical section because it's actually some thought-provoking ideas, so to speak, that managers can question their sales candidate about. It's like discussion starters or conversation starters that managers can have with potential salespeople. Since your company is using this with current salespeople as a developmental tool to help you get better and make more money, then really section number 5 isn't applicable. But since you've got some stuff in there, I wanted to share with you what that meant. And then lastly, what you'll find is one of my favorite pages in anybody's assessment is kind of a quick 1-page at a glance summary of all your categories. You'll notice the first, and they're in sequence of how we reviewed them in these video segments that you've been watching. The first categories are brake and accelerator, and they're already colorized. The next categories are the 12 types of call reluctance. They're already colorized. Then you've got the imposters, motivation, goal level, and goal diffusion, and problem solving, already colorized. And then we finish up with your attitudes about the questionnaire, and of course, they're already colorized. So that's kind of a handy dandy, just one quick glance page that you can look at to see all your scores already in bright and vivid colors. And some of you will have the question of whether you want your scores to be higher or lower, because you probably noticed that that changes as you go through your assessment. Sometimes you want a score to be as close to 100. Sometimes you want a score to be as close to 0 as possible. There's an interpretation guide that your facilitator should have handed you that will have all 21 measurements inside. We'll give you a definition or description for each of the 21 measurements, and then we'll tell you whether you want that category score to be as low as possible or as high as possible. So that's something that you can use as a way to kind of gauge where your score ranks, comparatively speaking, on the scale of 0 to 100. So there's your assessment. I hope none of you fainted while you reviewed your assessment results. I hope nobody broke down into tears. I'm sure you didn't. And I'm sure that most all of you are looking at this as for what it is. This is a growth opportunity. There are dollars associated with each type of call reluctance. There are dollars lost for commission salespeople connected to low motivation scores, connected to low goal level scores, connected to high goal diffusion scores. So I certainly hope you make a choice to work on some of these things. And it was a pleasure to be with you. I hope you got a lot out of this segment and in talking with your group mates about your particular measurements. So I'm signing off at this point. Again, this is Maynard Warren. Thank you very much for your attention, and good luck.